I still remember the day I rolled into my mother's living room, the dull creak of my new wheelchair echoing across the polished hardwood floor. My hands, trembling from both nerves and the lingering pain of injury, gripped the wheels as I tried to force a steady smile. My family, all sitting there in various states of forced politeness, could not hide their expressions of pity, or worse, annoyance. The war had taken my legs from me. My older brother, Peter, stared at me with a flat expression, and though he spoke polite words, I could feel his disapproval in the silence between the syllables. My younger sister, Mary, gave me a half-hearted hug, then distanced herself as though my wheelchair might infect her with misfortune. My mother, Linda, sat in her favorite armchair, arms crossed over her chest, eyes flicking between me and the floor. "You're back earlier than we expected, Daniel," Peter remarked. His words sounded hollow, as though we were strangers rather than siblings. In truth, I could not blame him. I had spent years overseas, stationed in tense territories, living through unimaginable nights of fear and unspeakable violence. My father, David, had passed away while I was gone, leaving only our mother, my brother, and my sister to continue their lives without me. And here I was, returning not as the strong soldier they had bid farewell to, but as a man whose lower body no longer responded. A man reliant on wheels instead of his own 2 feet. Despite the bitterness gnawing at me, I forced a small laugh. "Yeah, I guess my schedule opened up," I said, glancing down at my motionless legs. I tried for levity, but my words felt like throwing pebbles into a bottomless well. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the air conditioning humming gently in the background. I could see the unspoken question in their eyes. How would I contribute now? How could I be of use to anyone? My mother seemed to breathe an exasperated sigh. My sister leaned further away, as if physically distancing herself would help. Only Peter, with his stoic expression, asked me about the medical discharge process, about my rank, about my final checks from the military. He claimed a sincere interest, but his tone carried a thread of curiosity that felt invasive. I answered politely, describing the months of therapy, the endless circle of hospital corridors, the doctor's visits, the swirling confusion of insurance papers. All the while, no one asked me how I felt, only what I would do now. That night, alone in my childhood bedroom, which had lost much of its warmth since my father's death, I stared at the glow of streetlights filtering through my window. My thoughts raced with memories from the battlefield, images of my squad mates, some who never came home, drifting behind my eyelids. I recalled the day of the accident, an IED explosion on a dusty road, the searing heat, the screams. I remembered the moment my vision had gone black, only to return weeks later in a hospital bed, numb from the waist down. They told me I was lucky to be alive. Yet that night, in that old bedroom where I once dreamed of heroic deeds, I did not feel lucky at all. Days stretched into weeks, and the tension in my family's home mounted with each passing moment. My presence at first was tolerated, perhaps out of guilt or obligation. But soon, frustration seeped into every conversation. My mother, who had once been a supportive figure, now viewed me with a tense exasperation, as if I were an extra mouth to feed without the ability to bring home a paycheck. The financial burden was not small. My wheelchair needed repairs. My hospital bills were enormous. My partial pension from the military barely covered my personal expenses. Whenever I tried to assist, offering to help with dinner, doing the dishes from my seated position, the tasks took too long, or I would accidentally knock something over. My mother would close her eyes and sigh, then repeat that I should not bother. My sister echoed those sentiments, rolling her eyes behind my back. Soon, I realized that every effort I made, whether to help with chores or suggest a solution to a household issue, ended in subtle ridicule or outright scorn. "It's fine, Daniel," Mary would say with a note of impatience. "We got it covered." Then she would turn to my mother, ignoring the fact that I could still hear perfectly well, and whisper something about how he's more in the way than he's worth. If I confronted her about her words, she would shrug, offering only a dismissive look. The fact that I had changed so drastically, once known for my athleticism and bravery, now entirely dependent on others for the simplest tasks, seemed to open the door to an entirely new dynamic. Peter, who used to look up to me when we were kids, now barely spoke to me at all. I sensed a river of resentment running beneath his calm exterior. He had become the family's breadwinner in my absence, and I suspected he blamed me for not being able to fill that role with him. At mealtimes, my wheelchair barely fit between the table and the wall. My mother complained about having to move the furniture to accommodate me. On more than one occasion, I overheard her speaking on the phone to distant relatives, describing me in words that stabbed at my heart. He's not the Daniel we knew. He's helpless. He's stuck in that thing forever. Then, always in a hushed tone, she would add, I never thought my son would become such a burden. I began to wonder if I should leave, try to manage on my own. But I had nowhere else to go, not yet. My military discharge had been abrupt after the injury. I had been cut loose with a small monthly pension, enough to survive but not enough to thrive. I needed time, space, and a stable environment to figure out my next steps. Yet, the environment I had returned to felt anything but stable. My family saw me as an anchor dragging them down. The resentment they exuded fueled a deep spark of anger within me. An anger I tried to hide behind polite smiles and forced gratitude. One evening, an argument erupted. Peter complained about the rising cost of living, about my medical bills, about his frustration that I was stuck at home. My mother, sipping lukewarm tea, nodded in agreement. Mary chimed in with her usual sighs. I felt my chest tightening, my pulse pounding in my ears. What do you expect me to do? I burst out, voice quivering. Do you think I want to be in this chair? I'd give anything to walk again, to stand on my own 2 feet, to be the soldier you were once proud of. But I can't. My voice escalated to a near shout, echoing in the cramped living room. The silence that followed was thick. No one looked me in the eye. Later that night, after the others retreated to their rooms, I rolled onto the back porch. There, beneath the quiet stars, I let the tears come. My shoulders shook with each sob, my palms pressed against my face. If only they understood the nightmares, the pain, the sense of guilt I carried for surviving when so many of my brothers in arms did not. If only they could look beyond the chair and see that I was still me. But they didn't. They only saw the cost, the inconvenience. I felt a knot of humiliation twist in my stomach. It was in that moment that I decided I would not be a burden forever. In the following months, I spent countless hours researching online businesses from my old laptop, which I balanced on a tray attached to my wheelchair. I dove into the world of e-commerce, digital marketing, and product sourcing. I took free courses on coding and app development. I studied financial markets and learned about the volatility of stocks and cryptocurrencies. I discovered real estate investing strategies that did not require me to leave the house often. Everything could be managed remotely. No one in my family knew what I was doing, and I preferred it that way. They assumed I was wasting time, probably playing games or surfing the internet aimlessly. They paid no attention to my persistent tapping on the laptop's keyboard, the endless cups of coffee I consumed during late-night sessions, the spreadsheets and flowcharts I printed and tucked away in a locked desk drawer. During family gatherings, I continued to endure their backhanded comments and insults. At one birthday dinner for my mother, Peter complained about the cost of feeding me another plate of food, as though it were a lavish expense. Mary remarked that maybe I should consider living in a state-run facility for veterans. My mother's eyes widened. Then she quietly agreed it might be best for everyone. I forced a smile, swallowing my pride, my fury, and my heartbreak. Inside, though, my resolve burned brighter. They had no idea what I was building. In the quiet, lonely hours of night, I networked with mentors across the globe, entrepreneurs who found success despite physical limitations. Through video calls and chat forums, I learned that many people with disabilities had built thriving companies from their living rooms. I discovered the power of Amazon FBA, online coaching, affiliate marketing, digital product creation. I found success stories that mirrored my own struggles, fueling my ambition. My soldier's discipline, honed in the harshest environments, gave me an edge in the business world. When I set my mind to a task, I pushed through exhaustion and discouragement, forging a path forward. My first online store sold tactical gear and accessories, a niche I understood deeply from my military experience. It took months to set up, to source products from reliable suppliers, to establish marketing campaigns. But once the ads clicked, orders began trickling in. Then, as I improved my strategies, the trickle became a stream, and the stream became a river. I reinvested my small profits, scaling up gradually. Before long, I was juggling multiple suppliers and shipping hundreds of orders a week. My family, preoccupied with their own concerns, barely noticed the boxes arriving or shipping out. They rarely asked where I got the money to pay for my own wheelchair maintenance or the specialized computer equipment that slowly replaced my old laptop. If they asked, I waved off their curiosity with vague answers. They assumed perhaps the government or a charity was assisting me. They never looked deeper because they never believed I had the potential to do something grand on my own. Yet the pace at which my finances grew surprised even me. E-commerce was booming, and I had found the perfect niche at the perfect time. Soon, I branched out, creating digital guides and videos about survival tactics for everyday citizens, monetizing them through online platforms. I taught people how to maintain basic first aid, how to stay safe in uncertain situations, using my military knowledge as a credible foundation. My days overflowed with research, content creation, marketing, and customer support. Slowly but steadily, my bank account expanded. I learned about investments, placing my profits in promising stocks and properties that generated steady rental income. My hunger for independence fueled every decision, every late-night hustle. I refused to let my wheelchair define my financial destiny. As the months rolled by, my bond with my family frayed further. They saw me as a shut-in who contributed nothing to the household dynamic, a perpetual drain. They found it odd that I never asked them for money, but that curiosity never blossomed into genuine care. Instead, their criticisms escalated. My mother found reason to blame me for everything, from a missing grocery item to a higher electricity bill. Peter, who once might have been a partner in adversity, now saw me as competition for my mother's attention. He ridiculed my attempts at physical therapy, insinuating I was wasting time and resources on a pipe dream. Mary chipped in snide comments, reminding me that I was living in a family home rent-free. Finally, I decided it was time to move out. Thanks to my steadily growing ventures, I could afford to rent a modest apartment that was wheelchair accessible. Quietly, I paid a security deposit and signed a lease. When I announced at dinner one evening that I was leaving, the reaction was a mixture of surprise and relief. My mother did not ask how I would manage the rent. Instead, she stated in a curt tone, "Well, I guess we all have to move on. I hope you know what you're doing." I smiled and replied, "I do, Mom. I really do." Peter frowned slightly, perhaps finally wondering how I had suddenly found the means to afford my own place. Mary merely shrugged, as though bidding farewell to someone whose existence she could easily forget. None of them expected me to last more than a few months on my own. But I thrived. My new apartment, though modest, felt like a kingdom where I ruled. For the first time since leaving the military hospital, I felt free. The building had ramps, wide hallways, and an open-plan living room that made it easier to navigate in my wheelchair. From my desk near the window, I expanded my business empire. I launched additional online stores, each catering to a different niche but using the same marketing tactics I had perfected. I branched into software development, hiring freelancers to build applications for small companies that needed remote solutions. My personal brand grew, and I started giving online talks about overcoming adversity, drawing from my experiences as a disabled veteran. People listened, inspired by my story, and that only made my following and my revenue climb higher. I still attended physical therapy, pushing myself through painful exercises. My legs were paralyzed, yet I held on to a sliver of hope that advanced medical technology might someday offer improvement. Until then, I vowed never to let my wheelchair become an excuse to remain stagnant. My therapists noticed my determination and often commented on my unwavering spirit. They had no idea about the empire I was building after each therapy session. They only saw a man who refused to quit, A year passed in this manner, and I found myself with a bank account that dwarfed what I once thought was possible. My revenue soared well into the millions, diversified across e-commerce, real estate, digital products, and investments. But with success came an ache in my heart. The family who once meant everything to me had all but abandoned me. Apart from the rare text message from Mary or my mother, usually requesting help with minor tasks or errands, there was little contact. I learned from a distant aunt that my mother had fallen ill briefly, that Peter and Mary were squabbling over finances. Part of me considered stepping in to help, but then I recalled the bitter memories of their ridicule. I was torn between the desire to remain indifferent and the faint spark of familial loyalty. I decided I would bide my time. When an important moment arose, one that demanded my involvement, I would not turn away. However, I did not plan to reveal my success yet. Their scorn still reverberated in my thoughts whenever I doubted myself. It happened suddenly, on a cool autumn evening, that a frantic call from Mary lit up my phone. At first, I hesitated to answer. My chest clenched at the memory of her sneers. But something in my gut compelled me to pick up. Her voice, trembling and tearful, reached me through the speaker. My mother had suffered a health crisis. Minor stroke symptoms, but enough to scare Mary and Peter into rushing her to the hospital. The medical bills, Mary explained in a choked whisper, were beyond what she and Peter could handle. They needed help desperately. It was a surreal moment. The same people who had labeled me a burden, who had wished me away to a state facility, were now at my mercy. Anger flared within me, powerful and hot. A part of me wanted to hang up, to let them stew in the predicament they had created. But then I remembered the vow I had made to my father, back when he was alive. He had always told me to be the better person, to show compassion, to demonstrate honor even when others around me did not. I swallowed the bitterness. "I'll be there soon," I said, my tone neutral. When I arrived at the hospital, rolling into the fluorescent-lit hallway, the nurse at the reception desk directed me to my mother's room. I found Mary pacing in the corridor, eyes rimmed with worry, while Peter stood with arms crossed, looking stressed. My mother lay in a hospital bed, hooked to 4 lines, looking weak and frail. She managed a faint smile when she saw me. "Daniel," she breathed, tears gathering in her eyes. "I didn't know if you'd come." I nodded, emotions churning. "I'm here, Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "How are you feeling?" She blinked back tears. "I'm scared," she admitted, the fierce pride that had once defined her nowhere to be seen. In that moment, I realized she was just a human, frail and flawed, who had made terrible mistakes. I looked at Peter and Mary, both of whom stood silent, perhaps expecting me to vanish again. Instead, I turned to the doctor and asked for a detailed briefing of my mother's condition, the treatments she needed, and the associated costs. The doctor informed me that immediate treatment was crucial but expensive. My mother would need at-home care after leaving the hospital, rehabilitation sessions, and possibly expensive medications. Mary and Peter each explained their financial limitations with hushed embarrassment. I listened carefully, then quietly said, "Don't worry about the costs. I'll handle them." At first, they looked confused, as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. Peter's brow furrowed. Mary's eyes narrowed in puzzlement. "How?" Mary blurted, unable to mask her disbelief. "I mean, you're in a wheelchair. You can't even—" She caught herself, realizing the insensitivity of her words. I gave a small shrug. "I manage," I said, wheeling myself closer to my mother's bed. "Focus on Mom. I'll talk to the hospital billing department." Peter reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. It was the first genuine gesture of warmth I had felt from him in years. "Daniel, are you sure?" he asked, his voice laced with regret. "These bills are huge. You don't have a steady job. How are you going to pay them?" I turned my gaze to him, letting the weight of the unspoken truth sink in. "I have the means, Peter," I said, my voice calm. "More than enough. Let me handle this." That night, after the doctor confirmed my mother's condition was stable and she would remain under observation for a few days, I found Peter and Mary in the family lounge. They looked expectant, as though waiting for an explanation. I decided it was time. I pulled out my phone and opened a banking app, tapping a few screens. Then I turned it toward them, allowing them to see the balance in my primary account. The number was astonishing, over $4 million. Their jaws dropped in unison. This must be a joke, Peter stammered, eyes wide as saucers. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the figure. Mary looked at me, dumbfounded. How on earth? She whispered, as if the words might break the spell. Cleared my throat. The rush of long-suppressed vindication threatened to overwhelm me, but I tempered it with calm. I've been running online businesses, I explained. E-commerce stores, digital products, investments. I started a couple of years ago, learned the ropes, and now here I am. Their eyes flicked to my wheelchair, then to my face. I saw regret, shame, and a tinge of awe. They began to realize the truth. The man they had called a burden, the crippled soldier they mocked and dismissed, had quietly built an empire. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting the gravity of the revelation sink in. Peter swallowed hard. Daniel, I don't know what to say. Why didn't you tell us? Because, I replied, you never asked. You never cared to know what I was doing, how I was coping. You only saw me as a liability. Telling you would have felt pointless. Mary's eyes brimmed with tears. I'm so sorry, she whispered, a tremor in her voice. I said such horrible things. I never believed in you. I thought your life was over when you came back in that chair. I looked away, staring at a spot on the tiled floor. It almost was, I confessed softly. But then I realized that if I gave up, you'd be right. So I fought back in my own way. Peter pressed his lips together. Daniel, I hope you can forgive us. I've been so bitter, so resentful. And you overcame more than I can imagine. In that sterile hospital lounge, the three of us reconnected in a way I never thought possible. I saw genuine remorse in their faces, a vulnerability they had never shown before. While it did not erase the years of pain, it planted the seeds of healing. I'm willing to help Mom recover, I told them. I'll pay for the best care, the best therapy. But let's be clear, this doesn't wipe away what happened, or how you treated me. If we're going to move forward as a family, we need to address that. They nodded. Words of apology and tears of regret filled the room, each confession opening old wounds but also offering a chance to mend them. I heard Peter admit that he felt overshadowed by my military career and that, subconsciously, he had taken out his frustrations on me. Mary acknowledged that she feared our mother would become destitute with another dependent in the house, and so she acted cruelly to protect the family's resources. My mother, recovering in her hospital bed, later tearfully admitted that she was angry at life. Angry at the war for taking my father, angry at my injury, angry that she had lost the son she sent away. In her own twisted way, pushing me away was an attempt to preserve her fragile sense of normalcy. Over the next few weeks, I funded every aspect of my mother's treatment and rehabilitation. Nurses visited her daily at her home, administering medications and guiding her through gentle exercises. I remodeled parts of the house for better accessibility, making it safe not only for her, but also for myself whenever I visited. The final bill ran into tens of thousands, an amount I covered without a second thought. Peter and Mary watched in stunned amazement, gradually comprehending the scope of what I had accomplished. I spent time with my mother, sharing meals, talking about her health, carefully tiptoeing around the raw wounds of the past. Gradually, the tension eased. My siblings, seeing how I supported Mom, tried to rebuild a bond with me. They invited me to family dinners and actually listened when I spoke. For the first time in years, we laughed together, recalling old memories before the war, before the wheelchair. One sunny morning, my mother, now stronger and able to take short walks around the garden, asked to speak with me. We sat outside on a wooden bench, the scent of blooming flowers filling the air. I positioned my wheelchair beside her, and she placed a trembling hand on mine. I need to apologize, she began, her voice thick with emotion. I failed you, Daniel. Instead of being proud that you returned home alive, I resented that you didn't come back the same. I was scared of losing another piece of our family, and I took that fear out on you. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away, remembering the nights I had cried alone, the humiliation I had endured. Yet the sincerity in her voice touched me. I forgive you, Mom, I said quietly. I know how much you've lost. I lost a lot too, but at least we still have each other. She nodded, eyes glistening. Yes, we do, she whispered, and I hope we can be a real family again. The following months brought a gentle thaw to old resentments. Peter showed genuine interest in my businesses, asking for advice on how he could transition from his dead-end job into something more fulfilling. I shared what I could, happy to see him willing to learn. Mary, who had once sneered at my wheelchair, now offered to help me navigate the house or push my chair along uneven paths. At first, I insisted I could do it myself, but over time, I realized her gestures were sincere attempts at atonement. I let her help. One evening, Mary confessed her own dreams of starting a small bakery. She had a passion for baking but never had the funds or confidence to open a shop. With my entrepreneurial experience, I helped her draft a business plan, secure a small location, and launch a website for online orders. She poured her heart into that bakery, and watching her succeed filled me with a sense of satisfaction. We had come full circle. The sister who once saw me as a freeloader now looked up to me for support and guidance. As for me, my portfolio continued to flourish. I bought a larger, more accessible home in a tranquil neighborhood lined with tall oak trees. I equipped it with ramps, an elevator to access multiple floors, and a home office filled with cutting-edge technology. I no longer hid my wealth or success. My story even caught the attention of a local news channel, which interviewed me about my transition from wounded veteran to business mogul. The interview aired on a Sunday evening, surprising many people, including some distant relatives who had believed the rumors that I was a helpless invalid. My mother watched with pride, tears in her eyes. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly whole. One day, I decided to host a family gathering at my new home, inviting Peter, Mary, and my mother to see the fruit of my labors. They arrived, uncertain of what to expect. Peter's eyes swept over the spacious living room, the polished marble floors, the large windows overlooking a well-tended garden. Mary gasped at the modern kitchen and the culinary gadgets, an obvious delight sparkling in her eyes. My mother moved through the house slowly, pausing to rest now and then, a look of awe on her face. "How did you manage all this?" she asked, though she knew the general answer. "With hard work, determination, and a lot of late nights," I replied, grinning. "And a bit of luck, I suppose." We shared a meal, a feast delivered by a catering service I had hired. Laughter filled the high-ceilinged dining room as we recounted childhood memories and teased each other over old jokes. We also talked about the future, discussing trips we might take, ways we could support one another. Peter announced he was officially resigning from his stressful job, eager to pursue online ventures inspired by my journey. Mary revealed that her bakery had turned profitable, with orders flooding in daily. My mother, health improving steadily, beamed at us from the head of the table. As dusk approached, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, we gathered on the backyard patio. The sweet scent of freshly cut grass lingered in the air. My mother asked for a moment of silence. She took my hand in hers, then reached for Peter's and Mary's. "I want to give thanks," she said softly, her voice quivering with emotion, "to Daniel for his grace, for his forgiveness, and for showing us a better path. And to all of us, for finally coming together as a family again." Peter squeezed my shoulder, his face etched with gratitude. Mary leaned in, hugging me gently. My mother's eyes glistened under the fading light, her expression sincere. A wave of peace washed over me. The years of resentment, anger, and heartbreak did not vanish overnight, but they lost their grip. In its place came acceptance, forgiveness, and the uplifting knowledge that I had proven my worth, to myself most importantly, despite every obstacle. My wheelchair, once a symbol of defeat in my family's eyes, was now a testament to perseverance. A strong mind and a determined spirit could surpass any physical limitation. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a warmer, kinder rhythm. My mother moved into a nearby condo that I purchased for her, complete with medical amenities for her continued comfort. Peter joined me in a few joint business ventures, quickly discovering that I was an excellent mentor. Mary's bakery expanded to a second location, her confidence soaring. And every Sunday, the four of us gathered, sometimes at my house, other times at Mary's bakery, to share a meal and strengthen our renewed bond. Late one evening, as I sat in my study, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating stacks of business reports, I found myself reminiscing about the journey. A strange blend of pain and triumph swirled inside me. I thought of my father, the camaraderie of the battlefield, the day I lost my legs, the nights of bitter tears. I recalled the anguish of returning to a family that saw me as broken, worthless, and I marveled at how life had come full circle. How in striving to prove myself to them, I had discovered a wealth of ability within me that surpassed any physical shortcoming. I glanced at a framed photo on my desk. It showed me in uniform, standing tall with my squad mates, taken just weeks before the explosion that changed everything. I touched the smooth surface of the frame, a gentle reminder of the person I once was. Then, I turned my gaze to a mirror on the opposite wall. Reflecting back was a man seated in a sleek wheelchair, older, wiser, no less a warrior. I had gained a new form of strength, one that ran deeper than muscle or bone. A strength forged in adversity, tempered by sorrow, and finally crowned with success. A knock sounded at my door. Peter poked his head in. "Hey," he greeted, offering a small wave. "You got a minute to go over some new e-commerce numbers?" His tone was respectful, a far cry from the derision of the past. I nodded and smiled. "Sure. Come on in," I said, spinning my wheelchair to face him. As he walked in, flipping through pages of data, I realized that this was the moment I had once thought impossible. My brother respecting me, even looking up to me. My family unified, even if the journey to get here had been fraught with bitterness. For a moment, I felt an intense surge of gratitude, both for the second chance at life and the closure we had all found. Days turned into months, and each milestone felt like a gift. My rehabilitation continued, showing small but promising signs of progress, though no one could say for sure if I would ever walk again. Regardless, I poured myself into every session with the same determination I once reserved for my business. If there was even a remote chance, I intended to be ready. But whether I walked or not, I had already stood taller than I ever thought possible. And so, our family story reached a place of solace, a place none of us could have foreseen during those bleak days of resentment. We laughed together over shared meals, found comfort in each other's presence, and, yes, even made fun of each other in gentle, harmless ways. Exactly how families do. The wheelchair became just another piece of furniture, no longer a mark of disgrace, but a visible reminder of how far I had come. In the end, my wheelchair did not break me. It reshaped me, revealing strengths I had not known lay dormant. My family learned the lesson of humility and compassion, realizing that a person's true worth extends far beyond physical appearance or immediate utility. And as we continued down our respective paths, me as a successful entrepreneur, Peter as a budding businessman in his own right, Mary as a flourishing bakery owner, and my mother as a grateful parent enjoying her renewed health, we carried with us the knowledge that no obstacle, no cruelty, no moment of doubt could truly quench the flame of determination. I sometimes wonder how my life might have gone if the war had not claimed my legs, if my family had never turned against me, if I had never needed to prove them wrong. But that line of thought always ends in the same realization. Without those trials, I might never have discovered who I was meant to be. So, as the sun sets on another day of work and family gatherings, I find contentment, a sense of triumph so sweet that it warms my heart. The soldier in me may have lost the use of his legs, but he never lost his will to fight. And in fighting, I found riches, both material and emotional, that far surpass anything I could have imagined. The family who once mocked me now stands beside me, proud of who I've become. Together, we look forward to a brighter tomorrow, where the echoes of old bitterness have been replaced by hope, love, and respect. And that, I believe, is the real victory in this story. One that proves there is no darkness so deep that perseverance and forgiveness cannot guide you back into the light.